When my niece got married, my wife and I were delighted. Her husband-to-be is and was and is charming, funny, kind, and modest. My niece could not have asked for a nicer guy. Their wedding was simple and elegant, and the reception was also. Even though I was clearly the favored uncle, we did not merit the head table. Sadly, we were seated in and among the favored guests, but these turned out to be my nephew's colleagues and coworkers, which was a problem. And I should back up a second. One of the weird and perhaps wonderful things about living and working in DC is the sheer variety of people you might meet. There are great bars and world-class restaurants downtown, just like Chicago. But any of these restaurants, any of these bars, you might see ambassadors, senators, congresspeople, staffers, and lobbyists. You may also see folks from the Bureau of Labor, Veterans Affairs, Department of Education, or Agriculture, or State, or any of 100 NGOs. And you will also find folks who tell you that they work at the Bureau of Labor, Veterans Affairs, Departments of Education, or Agriculture, or State, or any of those 100 of NGOs, but instead actually work for a 3-letter agency with serious interest in international affairs. My new nephew-in-law, it's possible he was one of the latter. And after 20 years of government service, he'd climbed the ladder. And the room at the wedding reception dinner filled with his friends, colleagues, and coworkers. So this is what my big brother told me before the reception. I could talk to whomever I wanted. I could say anything I wanted. I could ask anything I wanted. But, my big brother told me, if I wanted to live to see the next day, I should keep my liberal, smart-aleck tongue firmly in my cheek and not ask anyone about CIA black sites. Julia and I were seated between two lovely couples. The two gentlemen in question may or may not have been section chiefs for certain Middle Eastern countries during one or both of the Iraq wars. Now, despite appearances and despite stories I've already told you, I am not an idiot. Once we were seated and first name only introductions were made, I boldly leapt into the awkwardness and said, "Can I ask a clumsy question? I don't want to be rude or put anyone into an awkward position, but I'm not sure what I can ask you all about." There was silence at the table for about 3 seconds. Then one of them leaned toward us and said, "Do you have any pets?" Do you have any pets? And for the next 2 hours, that's exactly what we talked about, pets. Specifically, dogs, cats, and goldfish. Turns out we have a ton of silly pet stories to share. The evening was surreal, to say the least. But it's also kind of amazing. And you know what? What I learned was that these folks, these lifelong Republicans, all were funny, conflicted, and altogether human, just like me. And that is a true story. The FOIA approved and fully redacted version will be available after today's service. The title for today's sermon is How to Talk to Strangers. But I could just have easily called it How to Not Be Lonely, or How to Survive Family Gatherings with Your Weird Relatives, or why America is so divided, because it is possible that all of these things are related. I've talked about this in the past, but let me remind you, about a year and a half ago, the Surgeon General released an 82-page report that outlined what he saw as a public health crisis, one that was widespread even before COVID. The report, titled "Our Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation," showed that over 50% of Americans report being lonely. 50%. The conclusion that the report goes on to make is that this is taking a profound toll on our individual health, an impact said to be about equivalent to smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. For our public health, this correlated directly with growth of political division and partisanship, increased fear of outsiders and others, a growing lack of empathy, and heightened distrust of public institutions. Loneliness and isolation are killing us, both individually and collectively. The causes of this, honestly, there are many. Social media, smartphones, algorithmically driven division, Fox News and Newsmax, and yes, MSNBC also. But also globalization, immigration, and diversity. The rhetoric of political cynicism, the rhetoric of professional activism, Newt Gingrich, Mark Zuckerberg, Cambridge Analytica, terrorism, stupidity. And to put it mildly, the pandemic did not help. Regardless of the specific cause, the upshot is that today we, the people, are less trusting, less accepting, less open, and less curious about other people. And this point, well, it should be a cliche that humans are social creatures, even if we studiously pretend to be islands separated by oceans of imaginary and manufactured difference. Truth is, we need each other, even though we pretend otherwise. For us, for a tradition asking itself what love calls us to do in a broken world, it's worth asking if the problems we see in the world aren't problems we created. And if not created, then maybe problems that we have perpetuated. It's worth asking if the common denominator to all of our many and varied problems is us. And that brings me to today and my apology. Because despite the ambitious aspirations of our weekly gatherings, this morning I do not have a plan to fix the world writ large. I have the concepts of a plan. Last December, we had a visit from a group called Braver Angels. Anybody remember that? Yeah, Braver Angels. Braver Angels is a relatively new organization, if you've not heard of them before. Their mission is to bridge the divides created by politics and partisanship. They bring together people who are willing to be curious about people who do not vote like they do. Typically, these meetings start off tense, but through a series of very structured exercises, these very divided groups get to know each other. And after pushing past the talking points and putting down the cheap shots, folks share their stories. Stories of who they are, why they believe what they believe, and discover that the other is just as human as they are. And while these sessions don't always work, the typical reaction all participants have, gratitude. And that's interesting and encouraging, I think. Now, if Braver Angels had its way, all of us, Republicans, Democrats, even the Libertarians, Socialists, and Greens, we'd all go through one or more of their seminars. And to be perfectly blunt, I believe this would be a most excellent thing. Because talking across political difference and doing it productively is complicated and hard. Today, very few people are willing to listen that hard. Now, my noble friend, Bhante Sujatha, likes to say that the world as a whole is too big for any one of us to tackle, but ourselves, we are the perfect size to take on. And I like that. So today, I want to suggest that you can make the world a better place, even while you are making you a better, happier, healthier, and more whole person. And that is why, instead of throwing up our hands at world problems, starting somewhere more modest seems wise. Perhaps we here, the few, the curious, can start. But where? Where to start? How about strangers? Danielle Allen, in her 2004 book, Talking to Strangers, offers us the following, quote, engage a stranger in conversation across racial, ethnic, or class divide, and one gets the ability to see and understand parts of the world that have been invisible to you. Real knowledge of what's outside one's garden cures fear. But only by talking to strangers can we come by such knowledge. Most of us take positive pleasure from living among strangers. They are, more often than not, a source of wonder to us. And wonder is, as Aristotle put it, the beginning of philosophy. Strangers help feed the human desire to learn. Wisdom about the world we currently inhabit cannot be gotten from books because they cannot be written or read fast enough. Strangers remain our best source. And it is in that spirit that I'm going to recommend another book, a different one, this one by Joe Keohane, and published in 2021, titled The Power of Strangers. The subtitle is The Benefits of Connecting in a Suspicious World. I bought a few copies for us to share in the hopes that some of you might want to follow up on today's themes. Come see me later if you want to borrow one. And no, before you ask, the book is not propaganda by an extrovert trying to convert us introverts into a new and better way of living. Instead, Keohane tries to answer three questions. 1, why don't we talk to strangers? 2, when will we? And 3, what happens when we do? Not to give it away or anything, but the answer to that last question is very much the prescription that the Surgeon General is trying to write for all of us. Assume for a moment that there are good and positive benefits to talking with strangers. The problem many of you already have leapt to at this point is that there are a lot of good reasons we don't talk to strangers, some of which are perfectly legit, some of which are wired in, some of which get taught to us by worried and wounded parents, siblings, and friends. But the one I want to lift up here is fear. Not fear of being carried off and eaten like a pet in Springfield, but the very common, very human fear of rejection. And that brings me to my first exercise. Take a moment. You ready? Now ask yourself this. Why don't you make eye contact on a bus or train? Do you bring a book to the doctor's office, or do you doom scroll on your smartphone? Why do you usually say, "I'm fine," when asked how your day is going? Why is shopping at Jewel Osco so different than Trader Joe's? Do you ever imagine in advance how badly a casual conversation might go? None of this is weird. None of this is helpful, but none of it's weird. And if any of that strikes you oddly, or if it makes you squirm or shift around in your seat, know that you are in good company. So here's what I want you to do. First, notice this behavior. When you're out on a walk in your neighborhood or strolling down 3rd Street, when you're in a store, when you're in the bank or the post office or Starbucks, notice how your eye slides off of other people and fight that feeling. What I want you to do is to pick someone, doesn't matter who. Silently, I want you to wish them well. Say to yourself, not out loud because that's weird, I want you to think at them, I hope you have a great day today. That's it. Do it as often as you can. It's easy peasy. My bet is that this will actually make you feel good. If you're ready, let's go interactive. Try making eye contact with someone random and non-threatening, but then hold it just a second longer than you normally would. Now, here's the trick to not looking like a psychopath. You have to smile. Not like that. And not just with your mouth, with your eyes. A real smile reaches your eyes and brings out the crinkles. Right? The crinkles. Some of you will be practicing this all afternoon, and that's good. For those of you taking notes, this is called a Duchenne smile. It's opposed to the Pan Am smile, which is just with your mouth. Strangers can totally tell the difference, and the Pan Am smile freaks people out. Goodbye, bye-bye, bye-bye, right? Yeah, don't do that. Anyway, try it out this week and let me know what happens. My bet is that most, but not all, most folks will return your smile with at least a little one of their own. Ready for level 3? Say yes. Okay. Say hello. Say hello. It's simple. Just say hello to one of these people. If you want to really get wacky, you can put some emphasis into it. Greetings, Earthling! That's probably too much. But hello, or hello there, that's probably just fine. But if that feels like a bridge too far, maybe try saying a sincere thank you to bus drivers, people who make space for you as you're walking, someone maybe holding a door for you, the busboy filling a glass. Not just thanks, but hey, thanks for doing that. I really appreciate it. Can you try that? My bet is that you're going to get a positive response. And if you're feeling a bit more comfortable with all this, here's a trick that Keohane taught me. Instead of saying, I'm fine, if someone is bold enough to actually ask the question, try responding with something more provocative. Oh, I'm about a 6.5 out of 10 today, to be honest. How about you? This, my friends, is bait. Some will not take the bait, and that's fine. But I guarantee you, doing this will startle many folks out of their robot subroutine. And they may look at you differently, and no, not in the I'm calling the cops kind of way. Now, they will likely mirror you. And my bet is that many will tell you where they fall on your imaginary line. And that's when you can ask, is that so? What's going to take then to get you to a 7 or a 9 or whatever today? Make eye contact, smile, maybe even raise your eyebrows. Because guess what? You're now having a conversation with a stranger. Now, my personal recommendation is not to do this when there's a huge line of decaffeinated zombies lined up behind you at the coffee shop. But generally speaking, coffee baristas are totally ready for this sort of thing. And while this might panic a random checkout clerk at Walmart or Jewel, it totally will not at Trader Joe's. They're trained to be a bunch of chatterbugs. And that makes Trader Joe's an excellent place to practice. Don't want you to get too cocky, so this is a good place to maybe leave it for now. But there are good books, classes, and organizations devoted to the idea that our world is better and bigger and more rewarding if only we are willing to make it that way. And Joe Keohane's book has quite a few suggestions if you're willing. And my big bet is this: if we are willing to do that one thing that organized religion has been trying to teach us for at least 3,000 years, our world might be different. Our world will be different. If we loved neighbors as we loved ourselves, the world will be different. And the way to make strangers into neighbors, you got it. Talk to them. If we put love at the center of our faith, as we say that we do, then this is our job. It is our job to see not only the holy in the face of everyone we meet, but wonder and possibility to make neighbors into friends. My friends, I can't tell you that doing any or all of these suggestions will end our epidemic of loneliness, or cure political dysfunction, or bring necessary healing to broken communities. Talking to strangers may not change the world, but with practice, it might change your world. And I would take that as a win. Amen.
Visit us at uusg.org.